on a beautiful sunny day. Thank you for being here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Perrault. And I'm just going to tell you a quick little story about how we got here. Way back January, maybe before that, Renee, who was a parent in our school, came to me and said, you know, I think we should do something to help our community understand and kind of figure out what it's like that we don't all learn the same way and we don't all see the world the same way. And the world doesn't see us all the same way. It would be really nice to kind of help our community understand that. And so we started looking at different presenters, different ways of doing it. And we found Suzanne, and we watched her TED Talk. Pretty cool. Okay, you know some of the And then we went to our PAC, who jumped on board, and that's what our PAC does. Our PAC is amazing. They jump on board for any, we call ourselves not the hot dog kind of PAC, but we're jump on board for all the things we can. And they said, yes, let's do that. That sounds amazing. And then we contacted our school district and said, you want to join us? And they said, yes, that sounds amazing. And we contacted our teacher union ProD committee, and they said yes. And Suzanne is actually going to spend the day on the Fraser Lake with our teachers tomorrow doing 2 sessions with staff. So they're getting to hear this message, the ones that are working with her as well. And then we put it out to other PACs. And EBUS jumped on board and said, yes, can we do that? And you know what, our families are all over the province, so can we live stream it? So we are actually live streaming this as well. And then we'll have a recording of our experience here, which is all pretty exciting. Very, very, very exciting. And we've got Camden, who is amazing, who's a student from MES, who does all this stuff and brings it out to the world. We don't know what we would do without him. Makes us sound very happy around him. And Suzanne arrived today. Have you ever been to this part of the world?
I used to live in Paris.
I used to live in Houston. So she's going to tell you her story. She's going to do it much better than I could ever do it. But I want to say thank you, Renee, for starting this journey. Thank you to all our partners who are making it happen. There's a lot of partners involved in this. Thank you, Camden, for being here and getting it out to the world. And Suzanne, thank you for coming to us. Welcome. Thank you.
I'd like to first open up tonight by acknowledging the territory that you're on, the anti-territory of Psychus. Sound like Psychus? And I want to thank you guys for coming tonight. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself before I dive into the actual presentation, because a very important part of the journey of why the presentation came to life. I am a mom, birth giver, as you heard. On my TED Talk, if you listen to it. No, a TED Talk's not really that huge. It's kind of nerve-wracking. Leading up to it, I had this joke going that I was going to say going into it that, you know, when you do a TED Talk, for 6 to 8 months you're going to bed with this person named Ted in your head, and you don't know who this person is, but they're owning every piece of you. And then you do it, and then it's like, wow, I can get rid of that. It's lovely. It was a really, really big privilege to be able to do the TED Talk. And that talk really got born from my personal experience on a couple of different levels. So first, as a mom of 3 children, 2 diagnosed on the spectrum with ADHD and anxiety, and 1 undiagnosed on the spectrum. She's my eldest, and she's a young adult now with high anxiety. I was brought into a world with them learning about autism at a time that we didn't know much about it. As I said, my eldest child, she's in her 20s now. And so it's been a long journey. This is not a new journey for me. And in that journey, I had to do a lot of advocating and learning. And part of that was wrestling through the educational system. I lived in 3 provinces in Canada with the kids. I've homeschooled. I've unschooled, meaning you let go of all trajectories and you move the child according to their gifts and abilities and what might be implanted in them and draw that out essentially. I've private schooled, I've distributed learning, and I've done brick and mortar, mainstream public school. So I've had my hands in all of it because Their minds are very diverse, and each of them had a very different learning style. And as a parent, I felt passionate about leading my children in the way they should go according to their gifts and abilities, and trying to figure out what works for them. And being in the box wasn't working. It was creating high anxiety. It was creating tension. One of my children was throwing up all the time. There's lots of problems going on. Regression, we weren't progressing. As I was moving through the years with my children and learning about advocacy and trying to understand how to help them get supports, I started finding my way with them. They started finding their way. And through that journey, 17 and a half years into my marriage with my children's father, my marriage dissolved suddenly. And it was a very impacting moment for me. And I was saying to this couple here, it was a time when I had to make a decision. It was either sink or swim. And I realized I'm still breathing, my nose is above water, I need to pull up, and I need to get up, and I need to get going, because these kids need me. And more importantly, my kids were doing really well. Other families needed me, because implanted in me was this gift to speak. Not knowing I had ADHD as a child, my report cards always said, Susie speaks too much, Susie talks too much. If Susie would focus more in class, her grades would be better. Susie needs to sit still, she needs to stop leaving her classroom. That ended up being my gift, and it ended up being my passion. It was a very, very profound experience kind of coming into that place. And so as I was coming through my separation, I, at 43, realized I've been homeschooling my children, and I haven't really been in the workforce a ton. And I need to figure this out. What are the things am I passionate about, and what to tie into my speaking abilities? And so I took a risk, and I took out a student loan, and I put myself into school, and went and got certified as a counselor and youth and family worker. And so I did that as I was going through my separation, ran for trustee, and did a TED Talk. The TED Talk came, which leads me here with you, ladies and gentlemen, as a result of an important assignment that I had to do at school. And that assignment was evolved around the grieving cycle. And they wanted us to write on death. And I thought, you know, as a counselor, I'm not going to be counseling people on death. I'm passionate about these families that are wrestling through this journey of what it means to advocate and the impact on the diagnosis, knowing what I had to walk through. And I recognized as I was working through the assignment that there was something really important here. And so I asked my educator if I can write on the grieving cycle as it impacts the parents when they receive the diagnosis of their child through a neurodiversity and invisible disability. Because it's a very different impact than it is when we have a child at birth born with a disability. We don't see it, we don't recognize it until age 5, age 8, 10, 12. And there's different impacts that happen along the way. So that is what drew me into this space today. And do you need me to speak louder?
You keep.
I can make my voice bigger. So that's what drew me into this space today. Today I'm involved with Human Dignity Coalition in Langley. I'm DPAC president, I'm a counselor. I mediate with families and schools and educators. When the communication breaks down, I go into the schools with the parents and work with the parents and the educators to bridge that gap. Because often what happens is everybody's interest is there for the children, but the emotions are so vulnerable and raw that lots of miscommunication happens, and the opportunity to move the process forward gets lost and relationships break down. That's a really big focus of what I do. I also do speaking with our educators and our parents, but mostly educators. I'm the president of the Langley DPAC for the past 3 years, and I'm also on the Inclusive Education Committee for my district for the last 6 years. So that gives you a little bit of a feeling of who I am and where my heart comes from and where I'm going with this. In my advocacy and my conversations It's become less about me and more about the stories of the families I work with, hundreds of families I work with, online as well as face-to-face. We have social media right now, which is our biggest social support system for families dealing with disabilities. Disabilities is the single most largest neglected group of people internationally. Our children with intellectual disabilities have the lowest graduation rates. Our children on the autism spectrum are graduating at 56%. That's really low. I self-identify as an autistic person with ADHD and with lots of anxiety. On takeoff today, I texted my girlfriend, said, I'm flying Prince George and on a small plane and my anxiety is through the roof right now. Oh my goodness, that was it right before takeoff. So we need to pay attention because our children can succeed and we need to do better. And it compels me to relentlessly push forward to speak on behalf of parents and children. The story that I told you just now was my motivator. My own story, but also listening to families when they tell me, I just got my IEP, can you look at it? And I look at it, and on the IEP, it says, grade 2 child, so-and-so is lying when he's not eating his lunch and telling us he is, and so-and-so is lying when he's not getting his assignments done. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this child's interfacing with anxiety, lying should never be on IEP. We've got to change our language matters. It impacts our hearts, it holds our minds, it shapes our spirits, and it leads us. We know historically, if our parents berated us as children growing up, we believe those messages. We know clinically in abusive relationships, the psychological abuse is one of the most damaging. And this is the subtleties of it. And so I'm after the language and how we manage our IEPs, how we work with our children, how we communicate with the parents and the primary caregiver of the child, the mother, often I'll refer to. You're just a mom. When I opened my TED Talk, I introduced myself as, I'm a birth giver. And I did that tongue in cheek on purpose because the underlying message is, you're just mom. But in it, being just mom, I'm a professional of that child and that child's diagnosis because I've researched the heck out of it. I've had people ask me if I'm going for my PhD because of the amount of knowledge I have on this stuff. I said, no, I just got a pervasive personality. I get stuck. It's my engine. What I want to take you through today is some experiences of what the families are walking through. And a lot of you, I don't know your stories, what drew you here today. Some of this is going to resonate with you, some of it's going to move you. For some of us, it might make us angry. And some of us would be like, it's not me. What I'm hoping for those who are interfacing with it, really here's the message. Wherever they are, if this live stream gets shown elsewhere, is that our other families with neurotypical children, children with no disabilities, hear this so that we can create a greater community. Because when the parent is interfacing with this journey, there's a sudden impact of loss on diagnosis. When my first child got diagnosed, wow, many years ago, I wasn't given the big binder. I was told, we don't have information, but if you read this one book called Asperger's by Tony Atwood, you'll know everything you need to know. That was my tool. I walked away, going to chapters with a piece of paper torn out of his pad with the name of a book. And that was my tool. And away I went. Today, our parents are handed a binder, and they say, here's everything you need to know. In that moment of diagnosis, even though the parent knows they're there for the purpose of diagnosis, the impact and the shock is still moving. And often the clinician isn't paying attention to where the parent is going in that moment of shift. because there's shift happens in us, and we may not even experience it in that moment. But to be warned that, hey, you might be feeling this in 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours, in 6 months, this experience may kick in for you. And that experience is that experience of loss. And it's surrounded, I'm trying to see here, my eyes are terrible. The first one is shock. Often we go down. So this is a very similar to your typical grieving cycle of death. And I'm going to take you to 2 grieving cycles that the parents are walking through. And they're kind of overlapping, so I want you to envision one pie circle as I'm going through, and then when I take you to the next level, you're going to see 2 layers happening. So this first one is about the diagnosis. So the parent was in shock, denial, sometimes addiction, there's social withdrawal, weakness, anger. A lot of those things are occurring because of lack of understanding. Sometimes it's ego in the family, because it's going, wow, did I do that? Was that my genes? There's all kinds of funny questions that come up because of our weakness in ourselves and how society postures us to have this image of fill in the blank. And so it becomes a very challenging experience. There's protest. So the protest is preoccupation with diagnosis. And I focus on that one because that was my thing. That's how I became great at it. So I preoccupied with it. But I ended up choosing to use it as a tool to move others forward versus sinking me. And it took time. Sometimes there's the feeling of anger, disorganization. For some of us, and this is not all our children, but some of us, when the children are younger, some of them can be very volatile. Lots of outbursts. It's called the no mind. N-O. No, not doing it. And it's a persistent one. And it becomes a very wearing experience for the parent. In those experiences, the parent becomes quite disorganized. It's hard to keep the normal semblance of family going, keeping up with laundry, cooking, social events, taking kids out to different experiences with the family. We're looking at, again, a decrease of a variety of different things. Socialization is a big one. The important piece about socialization is when we're dealing with intellect with disabilities as a whole, I'm not even going to single one out, when we're dealing with disabilities as a whole, it's very difficult for somebody to come in and relate into your world and go, how are you today? How's your little one? What are the ebbs and flows of your day? Where can I step in to help? Those pieces get lost. And on the playground, when we come in as parents with our children, there'll be a group of parents talking, and then we'll come in with our child and we'll move our child into the school, and then we leave. And there's no point of connection, or very little. It's a very difficult place because that opportunity to relate becomes void. Social media has become the comfort. We have many groups on Facebook. A couple of them have a couple thousand people in it. Most of them are under 1,000. It's a lot, it's big numbers. For parents to go and relate to one another and say, hey, I experienced this at school, this is what happened, and this is the chronic story. It's about school 90% of the time, and then there's a percentage vote at home. And it's that, I don't understand what's going on, my child's melting down, these incidences are happening, help me figure this out. And all these other parents will parachute in, and within 2-3 minutes, you'll have a thread of 50 responses, and you've got to sort through it and find out which pieces relate to your family and which you can resonate with, and how that problem, that solution can be implanted into your journey. So on the grieving cycle, we go through a process, and that process hits us into a reorganization. That's when we start stabilizing. In the disorganization phase, we may even do things like not eat well, not exercise anymore, all the things we used to love. The reorganization experience is where we come to that place where it's like, oh, I get it. I got it. I got a routine. We're in a routine. We're humming along, and this is going to be great. And then regression happens, and the challenge continues all over again. Between reorganization, for 6 months, 3 months, 3 weeks, there's that sense of that sense of ease. And as I said, a deterioration happens because of regression. When we see this cycle going around, when we think of the typical breathing cycle, there's a leap off. At some point we start leveling out and we come to a place of, I can breathe through this. When we're working through this cycle, there's not an ease off because developmentally the child's progressing, regressing, progressing, regressing. And so you're constantly learning. And so those of us, and I'm assuming everybody parents here? Yes, yeah. Awesome. So we know when we have toddlers, we're like, wow, look at this is great, we're there. And I figured you out, and we got a routine. And then all of a sudden they have a growth spurt, and they change. You remember that? Do I get to know? It's like, oh my goodness. And now they're not sleeping, and they don't like their food, and whatever it is. This is the ongoing cycle. So if you can imagine that, never ending. Someone asked the other day, there was this kind of joke that went around Facebook, and it was, if you want to understand a parent's fatigue interfacing with the journey of disability, imagine your life when you were a parent of a newborn and how exhausted you were. Well, that doesn't end for that parent. It just continues. That parent is that exhausted as you were then. Now, we remain completely exhausted and fragile. Where if someone looked deep enough into us and we allowed that mask to be removed, we might break in that moment if they came in and really sincerely we knew they were hitting us. They'd be like, I'm so tired. And so that's a dangerous place for us to be. And it leads us into the secondary loss, grief, downtown. So that's the first. Some of the primary impacts. The secondary loss goes into the individual and the family unit. Okay, because now it's going to have a trickle-down effect. Oops. It's going to have a trickle-down effect. Those of us who walk this journey know that if you're full-time working, how many phone calls a week do you get from the school? Come pick up your little one. Or your little one's doing this, and your heart's racing, you're sneaking off into the room, another room, to try to have that private conversation because instantly you're triggered into fight, flight, freeze. Instantly. You can't even help it. As soon as you know it's the school, I hear many parents go, as soon as I see the school's name show up on my phone, my heart is racing. That's a sign of post-traumatic stress disorder. It's the constant trigger, it's the constant hit on the system where all of a sudden you're triggered and you're there. You don't even know what's happening. It could be someone going, oh, you know what, you just forgot the lunch. Oh, right? But we know when we're being called multiple times, at some point, you have to take a reduction of hours, you have to find a new job, or you have to leave a job. Loss of identity. This is a really big one, especially for the primary caregiver and in the marriage. Primary caregiver becomes an advocate, not a mom or a dad, and who's the primary. They're constantly in this place of advocating liaison with the school, advocating liaison with the medical system, and trying to get the language together for both of them so they both understand. And it's a disparity, it's a great disparity. The role of parent shifts dramatically. What ends up happening is mom or dad or both is grooming the child daily to go into school to be that child, to fit the IEP goal so that they can stay in class so that it pleases the teacher and they succeed. And then they don't feel like a failure, the child doesn't have to feel like a failure, and the teacher's not calling. And the child doesn't have to feel less than and be sent home again. It's a very difficult experience in the marriage. Often what happens, not always, but often, one person is taking the child through the clinical process, getting the diagnosis, trying to educate the other parent. One's trying to accept that the other one's in denial. And so there's that advocating role going both ways. And it becomes a real challenge. Lots of dreams for the future. This one really hits a family unit in different ways. When we're expecting our children, we have these visions, whether we admit it or not, it happens. We have these hopes, we have these dreams, we have the child, and we're like, wow, what a feisty little one, right? Just all full of it. They're going to take on the world, and all of a sudden we find out, oh, that this is a no-brain. This brain is like in no mode all the time. And all of a sudden you realize, oh my goodness, we're not going this way with this child, we've got to go this way. And while we're looking at that and the rest of the world is going that way, we're going this way to create supports and community and abilities for the child to implement, to retrain them, to train them, to help them cope, whatever it is that's going on. And that experience of loss becomes, for some, very difficult because they don't get to do the things with the child. They may not get to see the child graduate, get married, have children. Those things may not happen. For many of us, I'm a testimony. It does happen. While the work it happens. Loss of faith. This is a really big one. When I opened my story, I talked about it. I thought my nose was above water, I was going to be okay. If I lost faith, which meant I lost hope, which means I lose my vision, I sink. When we lose faith, it could be faith in God, it could be faith in a program, a system, a spouse. We lose hope in that experience. And when we lose the hope, we become desperate, we become vulnerable, we become exposed, and we walk in a place of disbelief. And we're often triggered as a result. And we get angry. And when we lose faith and hope and vision, addiction set in, addictive patterns. We may not realize it could be shopping, eating, sex, drugs, alcohol, pornography. There's all kinds of different things that it can kick into. And we may not even want to admit it. Modern day thing right now, we see going around social media is wine, women and wine. We're shifting, we're really shifting right now. So we need to pay attention to that. And when we lose faith, we lose confidence. We can't hold our head up when we walk in the room. It's so important to be able to walk in the room and feel like I belong. We all belong. We all have to have that sense of belonging. It's important. That's equity. As beyond equality, it's equity in the community. It's building in. I don't have to agree with your thought process that you would have equity in this community. And you don't have to agree with mine, but you still have equity. You still belong. You're here for a purpose and a plan. And we need to support one another in that. And when we lose confidence, we need to start living that out. I think a lot of us can agree with that at certain points of our life. It's a very difficult thing to battle in the mind when that confidence level starts to diminish. We see it in our children. When our children are corrected too frequently, they start melting down frequently. They start being defiant more. They've lost confidence. Their ability to rise above that developmental piece in their mind is not firing off. And that's what happens with us as well. So we need to be careful with those processes. Oh, good Lord. Sorry. I am really great with cars. Technology is suck. Sorry. Loss of financial security. This ties in with loss of income. Loss of financial security for a lot of families. They need lots of supports. I have heard people say, well, you got funding. There's funding there for you. You got it. It's given to you. You got the funding. What's the matter? A, the funding's not enough. B, often parents are using funding to have people advocate for them instead of getting the supports they need. The people who are coming in to give the supports are advocating, so the child's not really getting supported because they're really trying to get the supports working. The parents aren't getting a rest because there's nobody in their world to give them a rest. And people say, well, the funding's there, just get respite. Well, the respite list is longer than this earth, and you can't get someone in. If you've got a child who is volatile, you can't just get anybody in. You have to have someone who understands it, who knows how to de-escalate, who knows how to regulate that child and get them grounded and centered. We don't have enough trained people out there. We're not paying attention to the critical issues that are going on. And the funding is nice, it's not enough. Myself, I never ever used funding. When I found out there was funding, when it came into play, I didn't access it. Why? The administrative process itself was so daunting and overwhelming that I was already overwhelmed. I thought, what the heck? I can't handle another administrative process. It was ridiculous, the amount of paperwork you have to do, the explaining, re-explaining, you pull somebody in, you interview them, then you have to wait, and then it's 6 months before they get paid, and then so you lose that person. So there's all kinds of impacts that are happening. So parents then end up dipping into their mortgages, pulling money out, selling their homes, liquidating to help get the supports for the child so their children can succeed, and they happily do it. We happily do it. But there's no stability. Sorry, guys. Loss of support systems. This is a really big one. And in fact, this one can shift so much of the others. That loss of support system can come simply between a husband and wife, mother and father, if one of the parents aren't accepting the diagnosis, because you rely on each other, you're to rub on each other, to sharpen each other, to support each other. And if one's not there, you're standing alone and you sink. And if you are there together, you want your family to support you. Often families, not all families, will say, well, if you just train them a little bit better, if you just set some more boundaries, you're too lenient, you spoiled, what are you doing? They use that as language to mask, it's not my problem, or I can't accept it. It's not my genes, it's that family's genes, it's them. You get that all the time. It's you, it's not me, it came from you. It doesn't matter where it came from. This is our gift, this child. And so we're called to surround it, but we lose that support system. And then we go out into the world and we try to, for the first few years, early years, we can make friends because, toddlers can fake it. And young children kind of fake it. My youngest one didn't fake it very well. If somebody accidentally hit him on the shoulder, his sensory processing disorder, he could discern if that was just, oh, I'm sorry, I bumped into you, to, oh, you're being mean, and I'm going to level you, right? What do you do with that? You have no choice but to kind of create separation. It's really challenging. So you start losing the support system because then your child is that child and you're that parent, and you're that family. I'm that mom, and I was that child, and I am that family. It's very difficult to have people come in and go, how are you doing? We need people in our educational community, in our family schools to support us. We need our immediate family to support us. We need at least one best friend who will check in on us and go, how do you do it? Do you need me to come take over? Do you need to sleep? Self-care is critical. It's paramount for families with children with disabilities. We talk about self-care in the world often right now. That's the big buzzword. But in families with children with disabilities, it's paramount because there's no rest, because there's no support. There's not enough. There's just not enough. And we have families breaking down. And when our families break down with raising children, and we lose our communities, we become siloed. And when we become siloed, then we start going backwards. We lose financial security. We have a loss of confidence. We lose our faith. We lose our dreams. We lose our identity. If we go back, that becomes the underbelly for support. And without it, we lose a lot. So this is really surrounding, for our educators, you'll hear a bit of this tomorrow, I won't spend a lot of time here, is us when we're getting ready for our IEP meetings. We're like, okay, this is coming in 2 months, yay, we're doing good. I can do this, I can do that. And then the stress starts building up. And you get that jerk in the back of your head. Moms and dads here who have children that are diagnosed, pay attention to this. This is your trigger. It's important that you recognize you have a trigger, and that trigger around IEPs is the call on you to have to remember all the experiences Johnny went through, the diagnosis, what the diagnosis means, why it means this, and why you need the supports, because you're called to recite it all the time. And you start building up the anxiety, right? And so when we pay attention to the triggers, then we can start caring for ourselves a little bit better. So we're getting closer to it. We're saying, fine, I'm fine, don't worry about it. Our table's starting to load up with all our documents, our past IEP report cards, doctor's reports. Make sense of it, draw the lines together, remind ourselves, okay, it's like our big exam, get ready, going in, and then we're exhausted. We're about ready to walk through the door. And that's it. We're breaking down. The amount of energy I know it takes me to walk into any IEP meeting by myself with a team of 5 people is extraordinary. It's extraordinary. It takes an extraordinary amount of energy to push yourself just through that door. And then you come in, and the right person asks you, how are you? It's like, I'm not okay. I'm so not okay. Many of us at IEP meetings, late. We're late for everything. Almost every family I know with a child with a disability is late for everything. Thank you, right? Why are we late? Because it takes so much time to get organized, and then you're waiting because, you know, everybody's obeying to the bathroom call again. So we gotta go back in, and this carries on. I have this journey now with my 15-year-old still, and he's doing fantastic. But it's suddenly getting out the door, and it's like, oh, I gotta go back, and then I lose him for like 5-10 minutes. This last month is the first month I had him in school on time. He's in mainstream public school for the last 2 years now, well, we're almost in 2 years. Last month was the only month consistently on time, late once. We're always late, okay? So when we're showing up at IEP meetings, it's now, even though they're not professors, it's us. We've been triggered. We're pulling it together. We're trying to organize ourselves, assemble ourselves, ground ourselves. And we're coming into these meetings sometimes angry. We're not really angry at the teachers. We're not really, truly angry at the educator in front of us. Educators are a trigger. And so we need to recognize that in ourselves. Even though there's stuff coming out of them that we don't like, it's not them. It's been the whole thing. Some of us don't even show up because we're fed up. We're done. For our educators, that's your red flag. Pay attention. For those of us who make it through the meeting and we seem okay, most of us will hit our car and break down. We'll have our meltdown, pull it back together, go get groceries, go back to work, go wherever we gotta go and do it. It's a really, really challenging journey that we don't acknowledge enough, that needs care. We are a community of people that need support because our children need support. If we speak into our children messages of well-being, even if they're that no child, they're going to get it. Ladies and gentlemen, I had the epitome of the no child. He was a flight risk. He was always eloping. He was hiding under the desk. He was physical every single day. He would grab my face and shred it with his little nails. He would grab his siblings' face and shred it, grab their arms. He was doing all kinds of things and couldn't figure out why. I didn't recognize it for what it was when he was little. But what I did do was consistently love him through it with boundaries. The doctor said he was the most difficult child they've ever diagnosed. Every educator that I had on him for years, he's the most difficult child they ever had. Come grade 4, he was not reading. His anxiety was so high, he would leave school, come home, throw up. That shouldn't happen. I was doing distributed learning at the time, so he was only in a couple days a week, literally 2 days a week, but he was throwing up. So mid-grade 4, I plucked him, I unschooled him. And I went, I'm going to go after this kid's heart. And I'm going to focus on his heart. Let him lead me. He started saying he wanted to do science. I said, great, let's do science, but we've got to read the instructions. Fight, fight, fight through it. We did this for 6 months. My friends, by the time this young man hit grade 5, in 6 months, he was reading just above grade level. It's a huge success. Statistically, our educators in the room will tell you, grade 3, if they're not reading, graduation rate significantly drops. Add being on the autistic spectrum, significantly drops. ADHD, even lower. Anxiety, here we go, we're out the door. This guy right now, he's in grade 9. He works with minimal support right now. He is doing it, he's pulling it off, he's in a trades program because he's a kinetic learner. Most of our young people with ADHD are kinetic learners. That's why Susie was out of her desk all the time, touching people, moving her desk, building things inside her desk, constantly, constantly, constant movement. We need to accommodate this learning style so that the brain will respond. When we're dealing with our children who are before the age 13, 14, we have to remember their brains aren't fully developed yet. Their meltdowns are happening because they're not coping. It's not because they're disobedient. They're not coping. They're communicating to you, I'm not coping. And so we need to shift this bus. And it starts with all of us as a community. We need to support the parents. We need to help the parents. The parents need to keep getting educated, getting our rest that we need. And then we need to wrap our arms around each other. And so, when I talk about there's hope, it's you, my big piece on this one is the educators. Educators were my saving grace. I grew up in a community in Winnipeg. Anybody know about Winnipeg here? Nobody, wow. Okay, I grew up in Winnipeg in a community in the poorest community. I registered myself for school for the first time in grade 4, by myself. I was taking buses all over a city at that age. I had no curfew. I was by myself for weeks at a time without a parent in the house. But I had teachers breathing life into me and saying, I believe in you, I believe in you, I believe in you. And despite the fact that I continued to grow up in the poorest of the poor, filled with gangs, lots of gangs, clubhouses, one clubhouse blew up half a block away from me. That's how immersed I was. I won't give you the full testimony, it's too much for tonight. But the point is, our frontline workers, I believe, is our educators. And when we partner with them, and they partner with us, and we get the communication lines moving in a healthy manner, our children get saved. And so it really sets us up for success. So the meeting here, setting the meeting up for success, that's the IEP meeting. I'm not going to take you guys through it except for the fact that I want you guys to go to your meetings. Make sure you've eaten. Don't go there hungry. It's bad. You're laughing because you know it's not good. You think you're okay and you're in a rush, you're getting everything done. You can feel that flutter in your veins of like, oh, I'm hungry. And then the right words get said at the meeting and it's a trigger. And emotions come out. And now all of a sudden the conversation goes sideways. Help your educators stay focused on the goal. Help your educators stay on with the agenda. At the back of the room, I created for you guys an IEP agenda. So, purpose of the meeting presented, reviewing testing if applicable, discussions of present level of progress, proposed goals, determine child's accommodation, child's test, schedule service for the classroom placement, and who has been present. It's important that we keep a history of this stuff so that we can continue scaffolding. This is education language. We want to scaffold the process. So if you're thinking, if you're building a house, you create the scaffolds to go up, right? That's kind of what we're doing in education. We're constantly scaffolding that journey. And so with our IEPs, moms and dads, we want to make sure that we're scaffolding it. I scaffolded my middle child's IEP. He's 2E. Do you know what 2E is? Anybody? It's twice exceptional. Twice exceptional, meaning diagnosed with, for example, autism, off the charts brilliant. I scaffolded his IEP since grade 2 because I homeschooled him for kindergarten, grade 1, and went, this kid's brilliant. He finished his curriculum in 3 months, a full curriculum. I'm like, oh my goodness, 100% on everything. At that time, I had the option to bump him ahead. I went, no way. Socially, emotionally, he's not there. We need to pay attention to that. So I scaffolded him all the way through with the intention of, if and when he caught up, I could jump him. And everybody was in agreement all the way through because I scaffolded it well. Kept using the language that needed to be done. And then come grade 7, he went, Mom, I want to jump a grade. I'm like, awesome, you're ready. School said, we don't do that. I said, well, we need to ask. Well, we don't do that. I said, well, we all agreed to the IEPs. We need to ask. He's demonstrated. Let's ask. Let's test it. I'm happy to receive a no if we ask. Took it to the district. We petitioned. My negotiating tool was, because math is a scaffolding class, let's do grade 8 math while he's doing grade 9, and if he can pull off that grade 8 while he's doing his grade 9 by December, if he's passing, we drop the rest of grade 8 and continue full on grade 9. And that's what we did. So we started September full grade 9 while doing grade 8 and 9 math. And that was because I scaffolded that well, right? I got that well. So we need to make sure we're getting that language right for your kiddos. Also at the back of the room, this is really important for our educators to get. There's a 3-page, it's not exhaustive. It's a very lengthy document of acronyms, clinical acronyms, a lot of our parents have to master, that we try to get into the education. This is what's going on. Some of our parents don't know this stuff off by heart yet. They need to know it. It's at the back. As educators, if you want to take a copy, you can go ahead. Part of that strategy also is creating a binder. Any of you have your binder for your kid? Got a couple of binders. Good job. Awesome. The importance of the binders, ladies and gentlemen, is in a binder you have Johnny's name on it. You have a whole bunch of tabs in there. One is going to be for IEPs, the other one's going to be for report cards, the other one's going to be for communication, the other one's going to be for contacts at the school. And then you have supportive information. I provided a bunch of links. In that binder, you put all the stuff in there. And this way, when you go to your meeting, you can go, oh, this IEP, this is what we talked about. This is what his report card said. The IEP and the report card are connected, because sometimes that happens. So we need to get them talking together so that the child can succeed. That provides you a log that you can readily go to. There's a link on here that is really important. It is 1, 2, 3, 4. It's the 5th link on here. It's about what is going on with your child's rights. It's a very important link that you should understand, so you understand the language to use, because language matters. The educators need to know what you mean, because they have their own language, but they use adaptation, modification. Do you know the difference? Who knows what adaptation is? No teachers. Modification. Libby, you want to explain it? There's a difference. Most parents, I ask this question all the time, this is where language matters. Parents don't understand. If you're doing your IEP with your child, for your child with your educators, and you're saying, I need to modify the curriculum here, in their brain, you're moving off the dogwood, and you don't even know it. You're thinking you're just subtly changing to give some supports. If you're asking for an adaptation, that's subtly changing it to give supports. But if you keep going and asking for modification, what you're asking for is to take your child off the stream from the dogwood and put them on the other green. And all of a sudden you hit grade 10, 11, you're like, my kids are ready. They can't cope. They haven't been prepared. What do you mean? Well, this is what you said, Miss Perrault. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. And you signed it. So our language really matters. It's really, really important. As parents, we get stuck a lot on medical pieces, and it's important. But when we're dealing with the IEPs and working with our educators, and because they're not trained as doctors, they don't know all this stuff. Although that's something I heavily advocate for, into the Ministry of Advanced Education, is that our educators start getting trained more in universities. We need to understand their language, because our language and their language is different. It matters. It's so critical. I just gave you one piece, but it's a really critical component that you need to be aware of. Under your IEP, you're going to see here as well another important document. It's from the Ministry of Education. It's a special education manual. Absolutely master that manual. You'll understand a lot about your child and how to help them go through the system. That is going to give you some tools to journey with your child. For those of you who don't have children with disabilities that are here to learn, I'm inviting you in to tackle this journey with our families, help create community. I'm looking at the back of the room right now, and I see passionate people put together all this lovely food. And food is where we develop community. It's where we become real with one another and vulnerable often. It's a level of intimacy We don't do it just to anyone. And so I would encourage you to gather around and be together, share with one another, and support one another, and go out and share that message that this needs to be done so that the children can succeed. Because everything I'm saying today is about children succeeding. If you can picture a triangle for me in your mind, I'm going to flip it upside down. I want you to see a child under the triangle, please. And you see that child trying to hold up this triangle. And on either end of the base, which should be the base, you've got parents and teachers, and they're not communicating well. That child is feeling an incredible amount of pressure because the child is intuitive, naturally. They're picking up on mom and dad's stress. They're picking up on the teacher's stress, and they're trying to fix it while melting down. And they can't do it. They're not capable. It's not even their job. But if we get that communication piece right, we get the language right, we get the cooperation right, we get the goals right, and we get the system working, we flip it around, all of a sudden the base is supporting the child's succeeding. The child's at the top where they belong, succeeding to become great leaders in society. Many of us could have been even greater leaders if we had the support. And so I call on us as a community to do that. So when I work with educators, when I work with families, I'm not coming and giving you tools, because that's not part of the process. It's a head and heart thing. Between the head and the heart is the longest distance for connection. My passion is to get this connected so that we see inclusion as a part of society. Just as when we walk into Walmart or Superstore or whatever, that door opens automatically for you as you approach it. We don't even think about it anymore, that door opens. The point of that door is inclusion. Most of us don't even think about that. That door was put there so a person with a wheelchair, a person with a cane, a person who's not capable of pushing and pulling can get in and out without limitations. That's inclusion. It became a mindset. We don't even think about it. That's how wonderful that succeeded. And that's what we need to do with this. We need to make it succeed so we're not thinking about it. It's who we are as a culture, as a society, as an educational system, as families, to remove the barriers, to walk in empathy, and support one another. And so I'm asking everybody, if it's not now, then when? If it's not you, we're at a time now that we're in a crisis. 1 in 63 children between 8 and 19 are diagnosed right now on the autism spectrum who are identified. That's almost half of the population. We can't ignore the statistics. We can't deny this journey that we're interfacing with. We need to shift. We need a cultural shift. We need a head shift. We need a heart shift so our children can succeed. That's my thoughts for today. Any questions? Are you okay? You're full. It's okay to be full. It's okay to be heavy. It's okay to be happy you heard. It's okay to be sad or mad. I want you to know that. It's a very raw experience when we open up the conversation and acknowledge it for what it is. My passion in this province is to get this open so that we can get our children succeeding and our families succeeding. When our families are succeeding, our teachers succeed. When our teachers are successful, our kids are successful. When we're successful, our kids are successful. When our kids are successful, society becomes successful. We can't get away from it. It's just, we're enmeshed. We need to figure it out. And you're going to walk away tonight with lots of feelings. I encourage you to talk about it, to journal on it. Recognize as parents who triggers. It's critical. My trigger is if someone patronizes me. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh. My fight comes in. I'm not flight, I'm not freeze, I'm fight instantly. And my brain goes fast, and I'm seeing the situation in slow motion, and I'm dissecting it, and I'm ready to like dive in to layers that person may not have understood, even what they were speaking to. So I need to be cognizant of that. Because I need to be mindful. Because my educator's my partner. We're a team. I'm the team lead. My child, I come in with the greatest expertise on my child. They're the team lead from the educational experience, and they get to go, wow, this is my view on how we can maneuver this way. And our goal is to bring it together for success for the child. So as parents, we need to understand who we are, what our fight is, which I'd rather change to the word of goal. What's your goal? Walk in with a goal. Know your goal. With my middle child, it was get him ready to jump his grade. He was like one of these kids, steady all the time. Come home, he'd pop when he was young, and then he'd be steady again. Teachers always said, we don't see anything. He's a dream child. I had teachers cry over this child because he was just so amazing in his character. And then my youngest one was polar opposite. I can't tell you how many times I thought I was going to break down. But my goal was to get his heart. I got his heart. I got his heart, and he knows where his heart is right now. Know your goal. When I work with my educators, I always tell them, with my youngest one, I care about his heart most. Education grades are last, always last. Because if we have their heart, then we get their mind. If we just have their mind, I had one educator in kindergarten. My first IEP meeting, I didn't know it was an IEP meeting. I was in a meeting, I didn't know what it was. I went into this meeting and they asked me what my goal was for my child, and I said, well, I need to know that I got his heart, and this is why, and education second. And she blew up on me, literally, she got angry at me. Then why do you have him here? I'm like, well, A, because of law, and B, because I want him to grow to be a thoughtful citizen in society. But if I don't have his heart, it doesn't matter how much education I have, because he's going to be a delinquent when he's 15, 16 years old, creating chaos. How am I going to get him into the workforce to be a productive leader? Because he's going to be a leader, whether he likes it or not. We're all leaders, whether you like it or not. You impact your world of influence. Doesn't matter where we go. We all have a world of influence and impact. And so she was completely dismayed. I got this child's heart now. He's so tender. He would never blow up. He would never strike anything. In fact, 2 months ago, he's 6'3". 2 months ago, at school, a boy was trying to give him a hard time and take something of his. And the boy went to strike my son. And my son caught his fist, put his hand on his shoulders, and said, no. And then he tried to do it with the other hand, and so he applied pressure. Of course, he got caught. And I go to pick him up from school. He comes to the car. He says, I got into a fight. And I'm like, what? Fight? What? And how come I haven't been called to the school? So he comes in, sits down, and he said, they're going to email you. I'm like, what kind of fight gets an email? Called in, suspension, something, right? So he tells me what happened. And then I get an email telling how well this child de-escalated the situation. and thanked me for having this heart. Because he showed leadership and self-control. We got to get their hearts. When their hearts happen, their minds start to develop differently. That no becomes a yes. At the very least, it becomes maybe. And then they come around. My guy's always a maybe first. Can you do the dishes? No. This needs to be done. I'm not doing it, as he hangs around the sink. Starts doing it. He always comes. Always, always, always. It's a very funny thing to watch, and you can predict it like clockwork. Be patient with yourself. Have grace with yourself. Be kind to yourself. Be kind in your thoughts to yourself and to each other. So important. So important. I want you guys to have hope and to have faith and to work towards a vision so that you can achieve your goal. And that's why Renee called me here today, to speak that out. And I thank you for the privilege of being here, and let me share your space with you, and your hearts with you, and my heart with you, and your time. I value it, and I'm honored and humbled that you would allow me to come.
On behalf of PACs and everybody else who helped coordinate Suzanne coming, I want to say thank you for taking the time and traveling so far to come up and speak to us tonight. And we have this wonderful card to give to you to say thank you.
In case you guys haven't seen it. Who made this? I'm not sure. It ain't 20, it was just me.
His name is Corey Hawkins from Sykes.
Oh, he makes beautiful art.
Wow.
Is he a student?
No,
No.
he
Wow.
has many kids that are students.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Please, before you leave, grab some food, if you want to. You feel free, I think, Suzanne, you're free to.
Yep, I'll bring them out to talk to people. And again, there's resources at the back behind the food. Enjoy the food.